The silver spacecraft descended through the orange sky of New Eden, its smooth surface reflecting the light of the planet's twin suns. Inside, Kirazin pressed her four-fingered hand against the viewing window, her large purple eyes taking in the human colony below. She had studied these creatures for months, but this would be her first time meeting them face to face. The human settlement spread out beneath her ship like a carefully arranged pattern of boxes and domes. It wasn't ugly, but it lacked the crystal spires and floating platforms of her homeworld. Kirazin checked her translator device one final time as the ship touched down on the landing pad. "Remember," her superior said, "these humans are new to space travel. They're like children playing with their first set of tools." Kirazin nodded, her head tendrils swaying gently. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, while her people, the Veldari, had been crossing the stars for over 1,000 years. The landing ramp lowered with a soft hiss. A group of humans waited below, dressed in what her research told her were formal military uniforms. Kirazin walked down slowly, adjusting to the gravity. A tall human male stepped forward, his uniform decorated with various colored patches and medals. "Welcome to New Eden," he said, his voice clear and professional. "I'm Staff Sergeant Chris Bennett, Colony Defense Advisor." Kirazin's translator worked perfectly, converting his speech into the musical tones of her language. "I am Scientist First Class Kirazin of the Veldari Science Division," she replied. "Thank you for allowing us to observe your colony." Chris gestured toward a nearby building. "Please, follow me. Commander Mitchell is waiting to discuss the terms of our cooperation." As they walked, Kirazin studied the human. His movements were efficient, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. She noticed a long weapon strapped to his back, a projectile thrower, primitive but apparently still in use. Her people had moved beyond such basic weapons centuries ago. The streets were busy with humans going about their daily tasks. Some stopped to stare at her tall, slender form and purple skin, but most simply nodded politely and continued their work. This surprised her. Most species showed more fear or excitement at first contact with the Veldari. Inside the administration building, they met Commander Laura Mitchell, a woman with short gray hair and stern features that softened when she smiled. "Scientist Kirazin, we're honored to have the Veldari's interest in our humble colony." Humble is accurate, Kirazin thought, but she kept this to herself. "Instead," she said, "we are interested in learning how humans adapt to new environments. Your species has spread remarkably quickly for one so young." Chris shifted slightly at her words, and Kirazin noticed his hand brush against the weapon on his back. The gesture wasn't threatening. It seemed almost unconscious, like a habit born of long practice. "Staff Sergeant Bennett will be your guide during your stay," Commander Mitchell explained. "He knows every aspect of our defense systems and colony operations." "Defense systems?" Kirazin asked, her head tendrils twitching with curiosity. "Are they necessary this far from populated space?" Chris's expression grew serious. "The frontier isn't always friendly, ma'am. We've had our share of unwelcome visitors." Something in his tone made Kirazin pause. Despite their primitive technology, these humans seemed quietly confident. She had studied their history. A species that had fought its way up from caves to the stars in a mere 10,000 years. Perhaps there was more to learn here than she had first thought. Looking at Chris's steady gaze and professional demeanor, Kirazin felt the first slight crack in her certainty of Veldari superiority. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything she thought she knew about humans and their capabilities. 2 weeks into her stay on New Eden, Kirazin sat in the colony's control center, watching the humans work. The morning sun cast long shadows through the window as emergency lights began flashing across the main screen. Maya Davidson, the young systems specialist, rushed to her station. "Commander Mitchell, we're picking up unusual signals from the outer system," Maya reported, her fingers moving quickly across her control panel. "Pattern matches known Scarlet Ravager frequencies." Kirazin noticed how Chris Bennett's body tensed at those words. He stepped forward, looking at the display. How many ships? At least 3 large vessels, Maya answered, possibly more hiding behind the gas giant. Commander Mitchell pressed a button on her chair. All stations, this is not a drill. Begin emergency protocols. Kirazin rose from her seat. Commander, the Veldari can help. Our defensive systems are far more advanced than anything these pirates possess. With respect, Chris said, his voice calm but firm, we should use everything at our disposal, both human and Veldari defenses. Kirazin's head tendrils twitched in confusion. Your projectile weapons and basic shields would only get in the way of our energy barriers. The Veldari defense grid alone can handle this threat. Chris turned to face her directly. These aren't ordinary pirates. The Scarlet Ravagers have stolen technology from a dozen different species. They adapt, they learn, and they're not afraid to try new tactics. Commander Mitchell nodded. Chris is right. We'll deploy both systems. Maya, start bringing our defense grid online. Kirazin, please contact your ship and request activation of the Veldari shields. As the humans moved with practiced efficiency, Kirazin watched Chris walk to a weapons locker. He pulled out his long-range rifle and began checking it carefully. The weapon looked so simple compared to Veldari pulse rifles, yet Chris handled it with the care of an artist with a precious instrument. Surely you don't plan to use that against starships, she asked. Chris smiled slightly. Pirates don't just stay in their ships, Kirazin. When they can't break through defenses, they often try ground assault. And in that case, this rifle might make all the difference. Alan Rogers, the head of security, rushed into the control room. Staff Sergeant, long-range scanners show they're using the new Centaurian cloaking tech. Our automated tracking systems are having trouble locking on. Switch to manual tracking, Chris ordered. Get our spotters in the towers. Sometimes human eyes see what computers miss. Kirazin couldn't hide her disbelief. Manual tracking. Against modern cloaking technology, that's impossible. Impossible is a word we don't use much here on the frontier, Commander Mitchell said quietly. Chris, get your teams in position. Alan, coordinate with colony defense. Maya, keep monitoring those signals. Kirazin watched as the humans prepared for battle. Their technology was basic, their methods seemed outdated, but there was something about their confidence that made her uncomfortable. They moved like experienced dancers performing a familiar routine, each person knowing their role perfectly. Through the window, she saw Chris walking toward the defense tower, his rifle slung across his back. The sun glinted off its simple metal scope. No electronic targeting, no AI assistance, just curved glass and practiced skill. Her own people had forgotten how to fight without computers and energy weapons. Looking at the calm determination on the humans' faces, she wondered if perhaps that forgetting had been a mistake. As the alert sirens began to sound across the colony, Kirazin realized she was about to witness either a demonstration of human foolishness or something that would change her understanding of warfare forever. She wasn't sure which possibility made her more nervous. The defense tower rose 30 stories above the colony, its metal frame catching the last rays of sunlight. Kirazin followed Chris up the stairs, her breathing steady despite the climb. They reached a room near the top, where large windows offered a clear view of the surrounding landscape. "This is your primitive observation post," she asked, looking at the simple setup. A cushioned mat lay on the floor, and a few basic instruments sat on a small table. Chris knelt down and opened his rifle case. Sometimes the simplest solutions work best. He began assembling his weapon with smooth, practiced movements. "Would you like to see how it works?" Kirazin sat down beside him, her curiosity overcoming her doubt. The rifle seemed to come together like a puzzle in Chris's hands. "No power source?" she asked. "Just mechanical energy and carefully shaped metal," Chris explained. He pointed out the window at a series of targets set up at different distances. "Watch." Chris lay down on the mat and positioned his rifle. Through her personal scanner, Kirazin analyzed the weather conditions. Wind speed varying between 15 and 20 kilometers per hour, humidity at 82%, air pressure dropping due to an approaching storm. "That target is 800 meters away," she said, pointing to a small metal disc. "In these conditions, hitting it with an unguided projectile is—" The rifle cracked, and the target rang like a bell. "Impossible." Chris finished her sentence with a small smile. "Let's try something harder." For the next hour, Chris demonstrated shot after shot. He hit targets through gaps in the trees, in shifting winds, even through the water spray of a nearby waterfall. Each time, Kirazin's scanner showed her the complexity of the calculations needed for such shots. Yet Chris made them with nothing but his eyes, his hands, and his simple rifle. "How do you account for all the variables?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "Experience, practice, feel." Chris handed her the rifle. "Want to try?" Kirazin held the weapon awkwardly. It felt dead in her hands, so different from the living tech of Veldari weapons. She tried to aim at the closest target, but everything seemed wrong. The radio crackled. Staff Sergeant Bennett, Maya's voice came through. "Pirates are entering the outer system. Multiple ships confirmed." Chris took back his rifle. Time to get ready for real. He began methodically checking his ammunition. "Kirazin, you should head back to the command center." "I want to stay," she said quickly. "To observe." Chris looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay quiet and out of sight. Things might get intense." Through the windows, Kirazin saw the Veldari defense grid powering up, creating sheets of purple energy above the colony. Human defenders took up positions, their own simpler weapons ready. The contrast between the two systems was stark. Commander Mitchell's voice came over the radio. "All units, be advised. Pirates are using some kind of new technology. Our long-range scans are being blocked." "Understood," Chris replied. He settled into position, his breathing becoming slow and regular. "Maya, can you still get me wind data?" "Basic readings only," Maya answered. "Most of our sensors are being jammed." Kirazin watched Chris make tiny adjustments to his scope. The sun had set, leaving them in twilight. Storm clouds gathered overhead, promising rain. By all logic, any attempt at accurate shooting would be futile in these conditions. Yet Chris seemed completely calm, as if the growing chaos around them meant nothing. She saw him glance at a leaf falling outside, noting its movement. He checked the way the grass bent in the wind. He was reading the environment like her people read computer displays. For the first time, Kirazin wondered if perhaps there were things about warfare that the Veldari, with all their advanced technology, had forgotten. The pirates struck just as the storm reached the colony. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating 3 massive ships breaking through the cloud cover. Their hulls were ugly, covered with stolen technology from a dozen worlds. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets. "Energy signatures are off the charts," Maya reported through the radio. "They've got something new." Kirazin stood by the window, watching her people's defense grid power up. Purple energy shields formed a dome over the colony, rippling with enough power to vaporize any normal ship. She felt a surge of pride. Now these humans would see true Veldari technology at work. The lead pirate ship fired. Instead of the expected energy blast, it released a cloud of shimmering particles. Where they touched the Veldari shields, the purple energy simply vanished. Impossible. Kirazin's head tendrils whipped in agitation. They're using shield-eating nanites, but that technology was lost centuries ago. "Nothing stays lost forever," Chris said calmly, not moving from his position. "Maya, what's our shield status?" "Our basic shields are holding, but the Veldari grid is failing sector by sector," Maya replied. "They're launching dropships." Through gaps in the failing energy shield, small craft descended toward the colony. Each one carried pirates ready for ground assault. Kirazin watched in horror as her people's supposedly perfect defense crumbled. "Commander Mitchell," Chris's voice was steady. "Request permission to engage ground targets." "Granted," Mitchell replied. "All defenders, weapons free. Protect the colony." The pirates' dropships landed in a circle around the colony's edges. Armored figures emerged, carrying advanced weapons. Their leader stepped out last, wearing a suit that seemed to shimmer and shift in the rain. "That's adaptive camouflage," Kirazin said. "Even our best sensors can't track it properly." Chris made a small adjustment to his scope. "Don't need sensors. See how the rain hits him. Tells me exactly where he is." Kirazin stared at the human in surprise. She looked back at the pirate leader, noticing how the falling raindrops indeed revealed his outline. Such a simple thing, yet she would never have thought of it. The pirates began their advance. Their weapons fired blasts of energy that overwhelmed the colony's remaining shields. Human defenders responded with their projectile weapons, but most shots bounced off the pirates' personal shields. "This is hopeless," Kirazin said. "Their shields are too strong for primitive bullets." "Maybe," Chris replied, still watching through his scope. "Or maybe they just haven't met the right bullet yet." The pirate leader raised his hand, and his forces split into attack groups. They moved with practiced skill, using stolen technology to devastating effect. The colony's outer buildings began taking damage. Yet Chris didn't fire. He remained still, watching, waiting. Kirazin saw his eyes track the pirate leader's movements, noted how he occasionally checked the wind by watching the rain's movement. "Why don't you shoot?" she asked. "Not the right moment," Chris said softly. "Patience is part of the job." A massive explosion rocked the colony as the pirates breached the main gate. Alarms blared throughout the settlement. The situation was rapidly becoming desperate. Commander Mitchell's voice crackled over the radio. "All units fall back to secondary positions. We need to protect the civilian shelters." The pirate leader stood in the open now, seemingly confident in his shield technology. He barked orders to his troops, directing the assault. To Kirazin, he looked invincible, protected by technology beyond even her people's current capabilities. But Chris just smiled, a small, quiet expression. "Now," he whispered, "now it gets interesting." Rain poured down as the pirate leader strode through the colony's broken gate. His shield flickered with rainbow colors, deflecting both bullets and energy weapons. Behind him, his forces pushed the defenders back street by street. The colony's situation grew worse by the minute. Kirazin used her scanner to analyze the pirate leader's defenses. His shield is cycling through frequencies faster than any targeting system could track. Even if you could hit him, the bullet would never get through. Chris remained silent, his eye pressed to his scope. His breathing stayed slow and steady despite the chaos below. The distance to the target was over 2 kilometers now, through heavy rain and gusting winds. "Sir," Maya's voice came through the radio. "The civilian bunker won't hold much longer. We need to do something." Commander Mitchell added, "Chris, if you have a shot, take it. Otherwise, we need to start evacuation procedures." Kirazin's scanner showed the full complexity of the situation. The bullet would have to travel through 3 different wind patterns. The rain created shifting areas of air pressure. The pirate's shield changed frequencies 50 times per second. Making such a shot would require calculations that would take her people's best computers several minutes to solve. Chris took a deep breath. "Maya, when I fire, I need you to hit them with every jamming frequency we have. Just for 2 seconds. But that won't affect their shields." Maya protested. "Not trying to affect their shields," Chris said calmly. "Just need to add some electromagnetic noise to the air." "Can you do it?" "Yes, sir. Ready on your mark." Kirazin watched in fascination as Chris made tiny adjustments to his rifle. His movements were precise, almost gentle. He wasn't using any advanced targeting systems, just his eyes and hands and years of experience. "That's a 2-kilometer shot," she said. "Through a storm, against a shifting shield. The odds of success are—" "Never tell me the odds," Chris replied with a small smile. Then his voice turned serious. "Maya, on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Now." The colony's jammers burst to life, filling the air with electromagnetic static. At that exact moment, Chris's fingers squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked once, the sound almost lost in the storm. Kirazin's scanner tracked the bullet's path. It curved up into the rain, its trajectory affected by wind and gravity. The bullet spun, creating its own microfield of air pressure. It passed through 3 different wind streams, its path adjusting slightly each time. Then something impossible happened. The bullet hit the pirate leader's shield at the exact microsecond when it was switching between frequencies. It slipped through a gap that existed for less than 1,000th of a second. A gap that no computer could have predicted in advance. The pirate leader fell. His shield, still functioning perfectly, flickered around his lifeless body. Silence fell across the battlefield. Pirates and defenders alike stared at their fallen leader. Kirazin's scanner was still trying to calculate how the shot had been possible. "Target down," Chris said quietly into his radio. "Commander Mitchell, you might want to offer their second-in-command a chance to surrender before I need to make any more shots." Kirazin looked at the human sniper with new eyes. How did you calculate all the variables?" Chris finally looked up from his scope. "Didn't calculate them. Not like your computers would. I felt them. When you've done this long enough, you don't see numbers. You see patterns. The wind, the rain, the shield. They're all dancing to the same rhythm. You just need to learn to dance with them." Below them, the pirates began dropping their weapons. The impossible shot had broken their will to fight. But Kirazin barely noticed. She was too busy reconsidering everything she thought she knew about human capabilities. The morning after the battle, Kirazin sat in the colony's science lab, reviewing recordings of Chris's shot. She had been there all night, running simulation after simulation. Her computer still insisted the shot was impossible. Maya brought her a cup of coffee, a human drink Kirazin had grown to enjoy. "Still trying to figure it out." "None of it makes sense," Kirazin said, her head tendrils twitching in frustration. The shield gap was smaller than a micro-unit. The timing needed was beyond perfect. The bullet's path through the storm should have been impossible to predict. "Maybe that's the problem," Maya suggested, sitting down beside her. "You're trying to predict it. Chris doesn't predict. He reads the situation as it happens." Outside the lab window, they could see crews repairing the colony's damaged buildings. The pirates who surrendered were helping with the cleanup, their spirit broken by a single perfect shot. Their advanced technology sat useless in storage, while human workers used simple tools to rebuild. Commander Mitchell entered the lab, followed by Chris. He was carrying his rifle case, looking as calm as ever. "Scientist Kirazin," Mitchell said, "your people's ships will arrive tomorrow to collect the pirates and their stolen technology. Do you have your report ready?" Kirazin looked at her data pad, then set it down. "I don't know what to write. How do I explain this to my superiors? They'll never believe that a human with a simple projectile weapon did what our best systems could not." Chris placed his rifle case on the table. "Would it help to understand how the shot really worked?" "Yes," Kirazin said eagerly. "Please explain the calculations you used." Chris opened the case and began breaking down his rifle. "No calculations. At least, not like you're thinking. When I'm in position, I don't see numbers. I see stories." "Stories." Kirazin's confusion showed in her voice. "The wind tells a story about where it's going. The rain tells a story about air pressure. The target's shield tells a story about its rhythm." Chris cleaned each part of his rifle with careful attention. "My job is to listen to all those stories at once and add my own chapter at exactly the right moment." Maya nodded. "It's like dancing. You don't calculate every step. You feel the music and move with it." Kirazin picked up a bullet, similar to the one that had made the impossible shot. Such a simple thing, just metal shaped by human hands. No electronics, no energy fields, no quantum guidance systems. "We Veldari have spent centuries letting our technology do our thinking," she said slowly. "We've forgotten how to see the stories in the world around us." Commander Mitchell smiled. "Perhaps that's something our peoples can learn from each other. Your technology combined with our intuition could be a powerful partnership. Chris reassembled his rifle, each piece clicking into place with precision. Want to learn how to read those stories, Hiruzen? I could teach you the basics. Hiruzen looked at the human sniper with new respect. Yesterday, she had thought him primitive. Today, she realized he was something else entirely. An artist who painted with physics, a poet who wrote in trajectories. Yes, she said, setting down her datapad. I would like that very much. Outside, the storm had cleared. A new day was beginning on New Eden, and with it, perhaps a new understanding between two very different peoples. Sometimes, Hiruzen realized, the impossible became possible when you stopped trying to calculate it and simply learned to feel it instead. 1 month after the pirate attack, Hiruzen stood on the shooting range outside the colony. The morning sun warmed her purple skin as she watched Chris train a group of new colonial defenders. Her official report to the Veldari High Council sat finished on her datapad, but she hadn't sent it yet. Remember, Chris told his students, the scope is just a tool. Your real targeting computer is right here. He tapped his forehead. And here. He placed a hand over his heart. The students looked confused, just as Hiruzen had been at first. But now she understood. After weeks of learning from Chris, she had begun to see what he saw, the subtle patterns in nature that no computer could fully grasp. Maya walked up beside her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Hiruzen. Ready to go home. The Veldari ship arrives tomorrow, Hiruzen said, sipping the hot drink. But I don't think I'm the same person who arrived here 2 months ago. They watched as Chris demonstrated a difficult shot. Without any electronic aids, he hit a moving target through a series of obstacles. His students gasped, but Hiruzen now saw the poetry in his movements, the way he read the wind and anticipated the target's path. What does your report say? Maya asked, nodding toward the datapad. Hiruzen picked it up and read aloud. The humans of New Eden have demonstrated capabilities that defy conventional analysis. Their approach to combat, particularly in sniper warfare, represents not a primitive methodology, but rather an advanced integration of human consciousness with natural phenomena. I recommend immediate revision of our classification of human military potential. She paused, then continued. Furthermore, I suggest a joint training program. The Veldari have much to teach humans about advanced technology, but we have even more to learn from them about the art of the possible. Commander Mitchell joined them, watching as Chris's students tried to copy his techniques. Some were starting to understand, making shots that Hiruzen would have called impossible just weeks ago. Your council won't like that report, Mitchell said with a gentle smile. No, they won't, Hiruzen agreed. They'll say I've gone native, that I've been corrupted by human thinking. They'll probably assign someone else to study your colony. And what will you tell them? Mitchell asked. Hiruzen watched as Chris knelt beside a student, helping her adjust her stance. I'll tell them that the greatest technology isn't always built in factories. Sometimes it grows in the human mind and heart, developed through years of practice and intuition. A cheer went up from the students as one of them made a particularly difficult shot. Chris nodded in approval, and Hiruzen saw the pride in his eyes. These humans, with their simple weapons and complex skills, had changed her forever. You know, Maya said, we're starting a new training program next month, combining Veldari tech with human shooting techniques. We could use an instructor who understands both sides. Hiruzen felt her head tendrils wave gently in pleasure. Are you offering me a job? If you want it, Commander Mitchell confirmed. Your people's technology and our methods. Imagine what we could achieve together. Hiruzen looked at her datapad one last time, then pressed send. Her report would shake the Veldari High Council's confidence, challenge their assumptions about human capabilities. But that was good. Sometimes the impossible only became possible when you were willing to question everything you thought you knew. Yes, she said, turning back to watch Chris and his students. I would like that very much. After all, Someone needs to help explain that impossible is just another word for something we haven't learned to understand yet. The morning sun rose higher over New Eden, casting long shadows across the training ground. In the distance, a student made another perfect shot, proving once again that the only real limits were the ones you placed on yourself.